I used to count the chairs at our kitchen table. 4 of them. Always 4. Then one morning, there were only 2. And that was how I knew my wife had fallen in love with someone else while he was still sleeping in our guest room. It was a Tuesday. I only remember that because the garbage bins were out and the recycling hadn't been picked up. The kind of thing you only notice when you're already watching your life slip into routine. The rain had started sometime after midnight. Not hard, just enough to make everything feel slower, grayer. I was driving home from town, headlights cutting through the fog that had rolled down from the hills, and that's when I saw him, just a shape at first, bent low in the ditch off County Road 6, maybe 20 yards past the old irrigation pipe. I slowed, not because I meant to help, but because I wasn't sure what I was seeing. He didn't move when I rolled down the window, just kept his head bowed, one arm clutched to his side like something inside him was caving in. I could have kept driving. I probably would have. But Ellen's voice was already in my head. You wouldn't just leave someone out there, would you? So I pulled over. He didn't speak when I stepped out. Didn't reach for help. Just nodded, once. Close up. I could see the blood on his shirt, darker than I expected. Not a lot, but thick. Stiff with dust and dried rain. His jeans were torn at the knee. One work boot missing its sole. Can you walk? I asked. He nodded again. And that was it. I helped him into the truck. He smelled like copper and heat. Not sweat, exactly. More like someone who'd spent the whole day trying not to fall apart. Ellen met us at the door barefoot, hair wet, like she'd been watching from the window. She didn't ask questions. Just opened the door and said, "Bring him in." I remember that clearly. Bring him in. Not who is he or what happened, just that. Like she already knew he was meant to be there. I laid him on the old couch in the den while Ellen gathered the first aid kit and a spare blanket. She moved fast, like it wasn't the first time she'd done this. She spoke softly as she knelt beside him, Spanish rolling off her tongue like water. I watched from the hallway, half in shadow. I didn't know she spoke it that well. I thought I knew how her voice sounded when she whispered. Turns out I didn't. His name was Luis. That's what she told me when I asked. Just Luis. She didn't say how she knew, or how long he should stay. He works with the roofing crews east of town, she said, wrapping his ribs in gauze like she'd done it before. Church volunteers brought him lunch last week. I remember his face. She said it like an answer. Like that was enough. He slept through the night. Or at least pretended to. I sat in the kitchen long after the lights were off, sipping cold coffee from a mug with a chipped handle. The house felt different with him in it. Not louder, not tense. Just off-axis. Like a picture frame hanging crooked. Ellen didn't come to bed until near 3 a.m. Her hands smelled like iodine. She slid under the sheets without a word. The next morning, Luis was already up. He'd folded the blanket, stacked the couch cushions neatly, and was standing barefoot in our backyard staring at the trees. Ellen brought him tea. I watched from the kitchen window. They didn't say anything to each other. She just handed it to him, smiled, then touched his arm lightly as she turned away. I think it was that touch that lodged itself in me. Small. Meaningless. But I felt it in my ribs. He stayed through the week. Ellen said he needed time. Said he couldn't go back to work like that. Ribs taped, wrists swelling. I didn't argue. I didn't ask when he'd leave. I told myself it was fine. But I started waking up at odd hours. Not because of noise, but because the house felt like it was holding its breath. Like there was a second conversation happening that I wasn't invited to. On Friday night, I walked past the den and saw the 2 of them at the table. Not close. Not inappropriate. Just sitting there, a Spanish dictionary between them, her handwriting penciled into the margins. She was laughing. I hadn't heard that sound in months. I stood there for a second too long, then kept walking. Upstairs, I opened our closet and stared at the shirts I hadn't worn since last fall. Nothing had moved. Nothing had changed. And yet, I felt like a guest in my own home. The real shift came Sunday afternoon. I came back from the hardware store, nothing urgent, just an excuse to be gone, and found Louise sweeping the back porch. Ellen was inside, baking something. Cinnamon filled the air. It didn't smell like our house anymore. Louise didn't see me. He was humming, low and tuneless. Peaceful, like he belonged there. I stepped past him, into the living room, sat down. Ellen walked in, handed me a cookie, and kissed the top of my head. Like it was any other Sunday. But it wasn't. Because when she handed Louise his plate, she called him by name. And she said it softly, like she'd been saying it for a long time. He stayed longer than I expected. That's how these things happen. Not through decisions, but through hesitations. One night turns to 3. A week becomes a rhythm. You start referring to someone's presence like weather, like furniture. Louise moved from the couch to the guest room the following Monday. Ellen had washed the sheets, dusted the dresser, even left a folded towel at the foot of the bed. She didn't ask me before doing any of that. I figured it made more sense, she said, not looking up from the laundry basket. And maybe it did. The guest room had sat unused for years. My brother slept there once, during his divorce. My father had napped there the last time he visited, before the stroke. But mostly, it was where we stored boxes we never opened. Louise cleared them out, said thank you every time she passed him something. Ellen smiled like she hadn't been tired in years. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning too slowly. The sound of 2 doors closing echoed down the hallway, first the bathroom, then the guest room. I listened harder than I should have. Not for anything obvious, just for the weight of the silence that followed. It was heavier than usual. During the day, Ellen went about things like normal. But there was a softness in her lately, not toward me exactly, but around me. The way someone carries a secret in their pocket. Gently, like it might break if touched too directly. Louise started joining her in the garden. Nothing formal. He'd weed while she watered. Pull out dead roots without being asked. Once I caught them both laughing over a crooked tomato that had grown in the shape of a heart. She held it up, grinning. He mimed holding it to his chest. It was stupid. Harmless. But I felt like I'd walked into something unfinished. They never stopped when I came near. That's what made it worse. There was no guilt. No performance. Just a shift in temperature I couldn't quite name. I told myself to stop being paranoid. To be decent. Louise was recovering. Ellen was being kind. That's who she'd always been, the better one. The good one. Still, I started noticing things. A pair of work gloves left by the back door. Not mine. 2 mugs in the sink when I'd only had one. The Spanish-English dictionary opened to a different page each day. Folded corners. Her handwriting in the margins. Words like quiero and esperar. I want ... To wait. I didn't ask her about it. I wasn't sure what I'd even be asking. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the first real cracks showed. I'd come home early from work, just a headache, nothing dramatic, and the house was quiet. Not empty, just hushed. I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, walked past the fridge, and noticed a sound. Not talking. Not music. A low murmur, like breath catching between sentences. It came from the hallway. From the guest room. I stood there, unsure of myself, long enough to start hearing the blood move in my ears. Then a voice, Ellen's, low, measured. Something about Friday. Something about time. Then Louis answering. His voice softer than hers. Almost careful. I didn't knock. I didn't open the door. I backed away. That night, Ellen made spaghetti. She added olives, even though she knows I don't like them. Said she forgot. Louise complimented the meal. She laughed. Said she'd teach him how to make it someday. We ate like we were 3 parts of a single silence. After dinner, I went to take out the trash. When I came back inside, Ellen and Louise were in the living room, heads close over a magazine spread. It was a travel feature, some island resort with clay roofs and turquoise water. She pointed at something, and he smiled, nodding. They didn't notice me standing there. Later that week, I walked into the garage to grab a screwdriver. We keep a junk drawer out there, half filled with old batteries and rusted nails, left over from when we thought we'd fix things ourselves. Tucked in the back corner was a cardboard box I didn't recognize. I opened it. Inside were two of my shirts, one of my books, my electric razor, a coffee mug I thought we'd lost. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't take anything out. I just closed the box and went back inside. The next morning, Ellen was at the sink, her back to me, hands buried in soapy water. She was humming a soft, drifting tune I didn't recognize. Luis was outside trimming the rose bushes. I watched her for a while. Finally, I said, I thought he was leaving this week. She paused. Not long. Just enough to register. Then, without turning around, she said, he has nowhere to go yet. I waited for the rest. There was no but. No, we'll talk about it. Just that. He has nowhere to go yet. Like that was enough. That night, I lay in bed with her beside me, both of us turned to our own edges of the mattress. The window was open, letting in the cool hum of the crickets outside. Somewhere in the dark house, a door creaked. I tried to remember the last time she'd reached for me in the dark. Not for comfort, not for habit, but for me. I couldn't. I closed my eyes and pictured a house with 3 people, but only 2 of them looking at each other. Luis bought her a pendant dot. Bent wire, copper brush dot. Simple. Ugly, if I'm honest. He shaped it into something like a leaf, or maybe a flame. I couldn't quite tell. It was uneven, hammered in places where the metal had refused to bend. A black cord looped through the top. It looked like something a child would make for their mother, and she wore it like it was gold. Ellen's birthday landed on a Thursday that year. Midweek. Mid-month. No party planned. She never liked attention. She said 40 wasn't worth celebrating, but I still ordered the necklace weeks ahead. A thin chain, real silver, with a small opal set into a teardrop. She'd once told me she liked stones that looked like they held weather inside them. I wrapped it in dark blue paper, left it in my drawer. I thought I'd give it to her after dinner, maybe on the porch, where the light softens and you can see your own breath this time of year. But when I came home, she was already wearing something around her neck. Luis had given it to her that morning, she told me. Said it was nothing. A kind gesture. He just wanted to thank us for letting him stay. Us. As if I'd chosen this. As if we'd made the same decisions. Dinner was roast chicken and rosemary potatoes. I bought a bottle of the wine she liked, the kind she only drank once or twice a year. Luis helped set the table. 3 plates. 3 glasses. Her seat in the middle. We ate by candlelight, though not intentionally. It was just that one of the kitchen lights had gone out the night before, and I hadn't gotten around to replacing it. So the house glowed in amber, and Ellen's pendant caught the light like an ember. Warm. Soft. Unmissable. She didn't touch the wine. I've got a headache, she said, rubbing her temple. The lights at work were too bright. Luis offered to clean up. Ellen helped. I sat in the quiet, their laughter drifting from the kitchen like something I'd once been part of but could no longer speak. Later that night, I opened the drawer where I'd hidden the gift. Still wrapped. Still perfect. I slipped it into my coat pocket. Walked outside. The cold was clean, at least. Honest. I drove out past the hill where the high school used to be, before the tornado took it down to the bones. Parked near the field where they'd started construction again. Watched the lights of town blink in and out behind the trees. Then I walked out into the tall grass, peeled back the paper, and buried the box under the roots of an old cedar. I didn't even open it. I didn't want to know how it looked in moonlight. The next morning, I noticed Luis's shoes by the back door. His coat hung beside mine. That had never happened before. Something about the way the sleeves touched made my stomach twist. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Just coats. That evening, I stood in the guest room. He wasn't home yet. Ellen had gone to bed early, said she had a migraine. I didn't knock. Just walked in. There wasn't much in the room. A neatly made bed, an open suitcase on the chair, a stack of library books, and beside them, the blue paper I'd wrapped Ellen's gift in. Folded, torn slightly at the seam. It had been opened. I checked the drawer again that night. Empty. I checked the pockets of all my coats. The box was gone. Maybe I'd imagined burying it. Maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing. Maybe I'd never wrapped it in the first place. But I remembered the paper, the ribbon, the way the opal caught the sun the day I bought it. I remembered. And yet it wasn't there. Luis started cooking breakfast on weekends. Said he liked the quiet hours. Said it reminded him of home. I let him. Ellen began sleeping in longer. She came downstairs already smiling, already dressed. She wore the pendant every day now, even when it didn't match, even when it hung too low against the neckline of her sweater and got caught in the zipper of her coat. She wore it like a mark, not a gift, a flag. There's a kind of silence that doesn't need to be spoken, a kind that settles into the grout of a house, into the rhythm of footfalls on the stairs, into the way people pass each other in doorways without touching. I stopped waiting for her to ask how my day was. She stopped pretending she hadn't already lived hers with someone else. 2 days after her birthday, I found something else. A receipt folded and forgotten between pages of the Spanish-English dictionary. Luis's handwriting, I think. Looped and careful. One item. Paid in cash. No name on it. It read, necklace repair. Opal. Sterling chain. $19.84. Jeweler, Ortega Brothers. He hadn't made her that pendant after all. I had. He just gave it to her. And she never corrected him. It started with the paperback. Just a beat-up novel left on the coffee table. A mystery, something with a red cover and a name I didn't recognize. Luis had been reading it in the evenings, mouthing the English silently to himself, his finger following each word like a child learning to speak again. He left it open sometimes, spine cracked flat, the pages splayed like a wound. I picked it up once out of boredom, not to snoop, just to see what kind of story he liked. Page 132, folded at the corner. I was about to close it when something slipped out, a piece of lined notebook paper, torn at the edge. Folded once, then again. I wouldn't have noticed it if it hadn't brushed my thumb. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. It wasn't addressed to anyone. But it wasn't for me. The handwriting was uneven. The words strained, like someone had written them slowly, with effort. But the feeling behind them was clear enough. I think of your hands when I cannot sleep. The way they touch the air. The way you brush your hair back when you laugh. I wait for the sound of your steps at night. I wait for you to look at me and not away. It was signed with just one letter. L. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't even good writing. But it didn't need to be. It was intimate. And it didn't belong in my house. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I tucked the paper back into the book. The same way I found it. Exactly the same fold. Same position. Same page. Like nothing had happened. Like I was still the man who believed in accidents. That night, she slept soundly. One arm draped across her stomach, the other bent toward her head like she was shielding herself from light. I watched her breathe for a while, then turned away. The next morning, she made eggs. Toast. Said she had a half day at work. Her voice was light. Normal. She kissed my cheek before leaving. I watched her drive off through the blinds. Luis was already outside, pruning the overgrown bushes along the back fence. Shirt off. Hands dirty. I made coffee. Sat at the table. Opened the book again. The note was gone. After that, I started noticing them. The other notes. Folded into the sleeve of her winter coat. Slipped behind the mirror in the upstairs bathroom. One hidden in a book of recipes she hadn't opened in years. Tucked between chicken paprikash and fig tart with rosemary crust. They weren't always romantic. Some were just fragments. You are morning. You are sky before heat. I dreamed you left, and I waited in the hallway. Your silence is the longest part of my day. They weren't poems, just raw pieces of someone trying to feel seen. Someone watching someone else live in a house they didn't belong to and wanting to be let in. And Ellen kept every single one. We stopped talking much after that, not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been written down in someone else's handwriting. She asked fewer questions about my day. Forgot to leave out dinner when she got home first. I started sleeping with the bedroom window open, even though it was getting cold. The silence between us changed shape. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was casual, familiar, like we were two strangers who'd learned how to pass each other in narrow hallways without brushing shoulders. One night, I walked past the guest room and heard music. Just a single song, playing low through a speaker, something soft and acoustic, Spanish lyrics rising and falling like breath. I stopped outside the door, listened. A chair creaked. A drawer slid shut. Then footsteps. Light ones. Barefoot. Moving slowly. I left before the door opened. I didn't want her to see me there. 2 days later, I found a note I wasn't supposed to find. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't folded. It was taped to the inside of the pantry, behind the shelves of canned soup and dried beans. As if she wanted it discovered, but not immediately. It was in her handwriting this time. Sometimes I think I've lived my whole life waiting for someone to see me without asking what's wrong. He sees me, without needing me to explain. I read it twice, then tore it down. That evening, she asked if we could switch the guest room and the office. Said she thought it would feel better for Louise to have more light. Said the corner room always felt closed in. I said sure. Moved the printer, the desk, the box of old tax records. She didn't move his suitcase. Just unpacked it entirely, folded everything into drawers. His jacket went into the closet. His books onto the shelf. I don't think he noticed what was happening. I think he thought she was being kind. But I knew better. She wasn't giving him a place to stay. She was giving him a place to belong. That night, I stepped out onto the porch. Sat in the dark with a glass of water, listening to the wind skim over the roof. The house behind me glowed soft and yellow. 2 shadows moved in the kitchen. One passed close behind the other. Paused for a second. Then kept going. No touch. But that's not what stayed with me. What stayed with me was the way Ellen turned, slow, almost shy, and watched Louise walk away. Not like a guest. Like something breaking loose inside her. Like it had already broken. It was subtle. That's the part that sticks with me. No slammed doors. No whispered apologies. No moment that split the before and after cleanly. Just the chair. One morning, it wasn't there. We had a small square table in the kitchen. For chairs. Always 4. We only ever used 3. One was always a little off balance, so it got pushed to the corner, half blocking the pantry, out of habit. That morning, I came downstairs and there were only 2 chairs at the table. One for her dad. One for him. She made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee. My mug wasn't out. Not a plate. Not a fork. I stood there in the doorway for a few seconds too long. She turned. "Oh, I didn't think you'd be hungry." That's all she said. Like forgetting a person was the same as forgetting the salt. Luis nodded at me. Said good morning the way he always did, quiet and warm. I soft around the edges like he meant it. But there was something else in him now, an ease that hadn't been there before. He wasn't waiting to be asked anymore. He was part of the room. I didn't answer. Just nodded and poured my coffee in the sink, still hot. That felt like something. Later that day, I pulled the 3rd chair from the garage, wiped off the dust, set it back at the table. Not to make a point, just because the table looked wrong without it. She didn't say anything, but she didn't sit there, either. That night, I asked her if she was happy. She paused while brushing her hair, then said, "I'm not unhappy." And somehow, that was worse. I tried again. "Do you love him?" She turned to me slowly. Not startled. Not angry. Just measured. I love how I feel when I'm around him. She let that sit. Then added, that might be the same thing. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. Not just the words. The shift. The decision. She wasn't cheating on me. She was leaving me in place. Luis stayed quiet the next few days. Kept to himself. I think he knew something had shifted. Maybe he felt guilty. Maybe not. But I could see it in the way he avoided eye contact. How he took his meals outside again. How he didn't use the radio in the den anymore. But Ellen didn't flinch. She moved through the house with a steadiness I hadn't seen in years. Like she was finally walking a path she'd drawn out months ago, maybe longer. The necklace, the one I bought, the one he gave, was gone now. She stopped wearing it. I asked once where it went. She just said it didn't fit anymore. And we both knew what that meant. Then came Sunday. I came downstairs to find the table reset. 3 plates this time. 3 mugs. Forks lined up. Napkins folded. A bowl of fruit I hadn't seen in the house in months. Ellen was dressed. Hair tied up. The soft sweater she used to wear when we went out to brunch in town. She looked at me and said, "We should talk." I waited. She didn't sit. "I've been seeing someone." I almost laughed. "You mean the man living in our guest room?" She flinched. "Just a little. It's not like that." "Then how is it?" She hesitated. Not because she didn't know, but because she knew exactly how to say it. "He feels like something I forgot I was allowed to want." I don't remember what I said after that. I think I just left the room. I didn't slam anything. Didn't yell. I just walked down the hall and sat in the office, the one we used to call your room, and then stopped calling anything at all. I stared at the desk. The papers I never moved. The printer with dust along the edges. A photograph of U.S., taken 7 years ago, on the Oregon coast, tilted slightly inside its frame. We were holding each other. Not tightly, but enough. I reached out, adjusted the angle, made us level again, then turned it face down. That night, Luis came to me. Not Ellen. Not both of them. Just him. He stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, not looking me in the eye. "I think it's better if I go," he said. I looked at him for a long time, then asked, "Do you love her?" He hesitated, then nodded. I didn't plan to. But yes. And she's the one who stays after the room is quiet. He said it like a confession, like it hurt to say out loud. I looked away. "Then why are you leaving?" He looked down. "Because I don't belong to this house. Only to her." He left the next morning. No bags, no big goodbye. Just the sound of the front door closing while I poured my coffee. I didn't look out the window. I didn't need to. I already knew the shape of his leaving. Ellen didn't cry. She didn't chase after him. She didn't ask me if I was okay. She just sat at the kitchen table and drank her coffee from the middle chair, the one he used to sit in. And that's when I knew it wasn't about him. It was never really about him. It was about absence. And how quickly you can be replaced by someone who simply sees what you've stopped looking at. The house settled after he left. That was the word that came to mind. Settled. Like dust. Like silence. Ellen didn't speak much for the first few days. She moved through the house as if retracing her steps, like someone trying to remember where they last placed something they already know is gone. She still made dinner. Still folded the laundry. Still asked if I wanted tea. But something was missing in her voice, something that used to pretend. I moved into the den. Not officially. I just started falling asleep there. At first with the TV on, then without it. I brought in a blanket, then a pillow. Then, after a few nights, the lamp from my nightstand. She didn't ask. The guest room stayed empty. She never touched it. Never repacked the drawers. Never reclaimed the closet space. It sat like a still photograph, untouched and waiting, like a memory we'd both agreed not to speak of. One morning, a letter arrived. Not handwritten. Typed. Formal. From Luis. Ellen opened it without hesitation. She read it at the table while eating toast, buttered too heavily. She didn't cry, didn't read it twice. When she was done, she folded it once and placed it on the table between us. "He's gone back," she said, "to Mexico. He says thank you for everything." I nodded. She didn't ask if I wanted to read it, and I didn't reach for it. Some things are better unread. I found the pendant a few days later, tucked in the back of the silverware drawer, tangled around a forgotten corkscrew. The same wire Louise had twisted with careful hands, now dull, the copper dimmed from skin and sweat and weather. I held it for a long time, not because it meant something, but because it had once. Then I set it on the windowsill above the sink. She never touched it. The conversation we were supposed to have, the one about love, about leaving, about what now, never came. We didn't fight. We didn't cry. We just lived on opposite sides of a shared quiet. Meals were shorter, words more precise. She said good night like a fact. One evening, I asked if she ever thought about leaving. She didn't look up from her book, just said, "Every day." Then turned the page. I started noticing her absence in stranger ways. The bathroom mirror no longer fogged twice. The thermostat stayed at the same number, day and night. Her shoes, always the red ones, no longer waited by the door. One morning I opened the closet and realized half her clothes were gone. Quietly, without announcement. Not all at once. Just piece by piece. Like she was disappearing in fragments, careful not to disturb the air. I didn't ask where she was going, and she didn't say. That was our new agreement. Weeks passed like that. Then one morning, I found a key under the bed. A small one. Dull brass. No label. It didn't match anything in the house. Not the front door, not the garage, not the filing cabinet in the office. I turned it over in my palm for a long time, and I knew, not what it opened, but who it belonged to. I placed it on her nightstand before I left for work. When I came home, it was gone. That night, she stood in the doorway of the den, watching me fold my blanket. She didn't speak, just waited. Then, after a while, she said, "I never meant to fall in love with him." I nodded. And I never meant to stay married to someone who wouldn't notice when I disappeared. I didn't respond, because she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was just saying it out loud. She left the next morning. No bags. No goodbye. Just gone. The den was still warm from where I'd slept. The pillow still carried the shape of my head. I sat there for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum. Then I stood up, walked into the bedroom. The closet was empty. The bed was made. And on the table by the window, where the pendant used to sit, there was only the outline of dust where it had rested. A negative space. I opened the window, let the air move through the room like it had been waiting to do for years. And I said nothing. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because everything had already been spoken. Just not to me. Thanks for watching. If this story pulled you in, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next confession. Until next time, take care and watch who you trust.